My name is Bebe Loff. I'm an Associate Professor and Director of the Michael Kirby Centre for Public Health and Human Rights. When researchers want to conduct research, having gone through the process of dreaming up the idea and applying for the funds and getting the funds, they have to go to a group of people called an ethics committee to get ethical approval before they can proceed with the research. Generally, institutions like universities and other research institutions will have ethics committees, and they consist of people both inside and outside the institution who will look at the research and deem whether it meets certain criteria, and if so, they will grant approval and the research will continue. Public health ethics and research ethics are completely different. Research ethics are very specifically, as their name suggests, focused on the right things and the wrong things to do in research. Examples of this are whether or not, let's say you want to do research in a resource-poor setting, whether that research meets the needs of people in that setting, whether it takes advantage of the vulnerability of people in that setting, and how it is that the researchers will relate to the populations that they are hoping will participate in their research. Public health ethics, on the other hand, is actually about public health. The sorts of issues that often come up in public health are whether or not the interests of the majority of people outweigh the interests of a minority of people, and whether public health programs should or should not proceed, and the reasons for this. Normally, the sorts of things that researchers and ethics committees tend to focus on are whether participants are providing informed consent, and if the research is not designed to obtain consent from the participants directly, whether it ought to proceed or not. The sorts of things that get missed out are the potential for unjust exploitation of participants. What ought to be offered to people living in poverty to induce them to participate, and whether these inducements are appropriate or inappropriate. The human rights conditions that people live in, the sorts of research that can be carried out in disaster areas. There are so many issues that arise that most people simply don't consider. In fact, I actually myself resigned from an ethics committee because I thought that a project approved was being complicit with a human rights abuse. And these things one need, and that was in this country, these things really need to be so carefully considered, and I'm afraid we simply don't provide sufficient training either to our researchers or to members of the ethics committees to make them sufficiently aware of the whole broad range of ethical dilemmas and challenges that might arise.